Carry on, Luke.
Hold on. Let me got it first. There we go. That's great. Okay. As I said, welcome. Our second meeting in the year. And we've got two fantastic speakers. We've got Dr. Francisco Dominguez, and we've got Kwabena, Nyack. The two topics are important for us because in one way or the other, they will affect the people we are concerned about in the region and in the UK. It's a big issue for people who have been immigrants or who have traveled. We've seen the crazy pronouncements of Trump just recently about deporting people, and him actually started doing that, picking on Colombia as the first place to begin. More mischief is being made, but we'll hear from Francisco in a little while to update us on what's happening there. Just on this front here in the UK, we've had a big demonstration yesterday, which was really attended in good spirit. The police behaved themselves as compared to the last meeting, the last demonstration that I missed because I was actually traveling on the plane back to London. But I would definitely have been at that demonstration. From the reports I've had, some people have been roughed up. Somebody described to me how this policeman just punctured one black guy, 3 policemen, and different things. And we know people have been arrested and charged, and it's a real, but there's been an outcry from a lot of human rights people, lawyers and so on, who are saying this is an infringement really on our right to protest. And it's something we've got to keep our eye on and keep pushing to make sure we can protest. And we have so much of protests about it. We're able to do that. Okay, without much ado, I shall go into our first speaker and ask Dr. Francisco Dominguez to take the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luke. What we can say about what he will do is not much, except that we know Trump's intentions. But what I want to do is to deal with this from a more structural point of view, rather than focusing on the individual, which I will do later on anyway, is to look at how the severe decline of the United States is creating objective necessities that they need to sort out and deal with and carry out if they're going to maintain their world supremacy, which is really what is at stake. And that what explains a great deal of what he's been saying he's going to do and what has begun to do already. So let me start with the question of the decline. The United States, as presently constituted, doesn't have a coherent economy. A great deal of their companies, I don't have the figures, but a huge amount of them actually left the country and established themselves elsewhere. They went to China, they went to Vietnam, they went to Mexico, they went to the Caribbean, they went to Central America and many other places. And the reason they did this was because they were losing the competitive battle with, giants that were emerging, such as Japan, Germany, and later on China. And they didn't have the technological capacity, certainly not at the same level as their competitors. So they tried to take advantage of their international position by relocating their enterprises and benefiting from cheap labor. In fact, it was very cheap. And this lasted a long time. We're talking about 20, 25 years, perhaps even more. Just to give you an idea, the number of people who US companies employed in the north of Mexico, which are called maquilas, is over 1 million workers. And there are thousands of companies, easily more than 3,000, that actually are there. This created a very serious problem in the interior of the United States by creating ghost towns creating chronic unemployment, and then pushing out, as it were, from the benefit of a very strong economy before, what we would call, for as a shorthand, the white working class, particularly in the what is known now as the Rust Belt, which is in the north, where most of the industry were. Also, as a result of the same considerations, similar to what Thatcher did here, they got rid of the basic industry, steel, coal, and so on, and they closed them down because it was more convenient from them, as it was for the UK and many other of the Western countries, to purchase this coal and steel from, South Korea and other places. So that again created another batch of people who all became chronically unemployed. Thirdly, the United States was growing not at an extraordinary rate, and this became very apparent when it came to the question of the comparison with China. The Chinese economy over the crucial period, say 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020, was growing at a rate of something like 10% per year. That's an average. The United States economy in the same period was growing at a rate of something like 2%. So that was clearly the case. And that's why China, very quickly, although they began their economic reform in 1978, China took off, I think, around 1992, 1993. And then it became the second largest economy in the world in almost no time. What is interesting about this, and just a sort of interesting footnote, if I may, is that China is the only country that became developed industrially, economically, technologically, and in every other sense, without actually resorting to colonization of anybody. Whereas all the other countries that were successful, including the United States, the UK, Germany, and so on, they all had colonies before. And that's the key difference. In other words, the periphery or the global south can access development and modernization through their own path without necessarily, using violence. So these began to worry the United States quite dramatically. And what the United States began to do was to expand more massively as ever. Two things. Number one, they began to massively expand their military power. The United States has something like 800 military bases around the world, which are extremely costly. That's number one. But number two, because it was losing the competitive battle and it wasn't producing things at home as it was before, where it was the main industrial power of the world, it was importing more than was exporting. The consequence of that was trade deficits, which were growing year in and year out. And these trade deficits were being accumulated from Canada, Mexico, China, the European Union, and a few others. But those four I mentioned are the key ones. The level of trade deficit the United States has with these countries is, say, in the case of Mexico, is more than 165 billion. With the European Union and China is around 400 billion. And with Canada is about 300 billion. So that gives you an idea that it's something like, more than nearly $2 trillion. $2 trillion is a huge amount. It's sort of something like half the UK economy, only in trade deficit. So the United States, in order to remedy this issue or to address it, decided to increase their debt. And every year, the United States, the only country that can borrow money almost unimpeded. And the way they do it is by issuing treasury bonds, which everybody purchases. In fact, this is not necessarily a financial recommendation to anybody, but if you buy bonds of the state of the United States, US bonds, that's a very good investment. But don't do it. Please don't do it. Because it's as good as gold. The chances of the United States, going bankrupt or something like that is very, very small. So every year you see presidents in the United States, that applies to many presidents, not only the last two or the last three, they have to go to Congress annually to request the increase in the external debt. And as a consequence of that, the United States has a debt which is staggeringly huge. I mean, it's the largest external debt ever, public debt ever. The United States has a GDP which is in the region of $28 trillion, and the external debt is $8 trillion. Sorry, the external debt is $36 trillion. That is to say, if the United States were to pay everything it produces in 1 year, which is huge, into the external debt, or the public debt, it will still owe 8 trillion. 8 trillion is larger, bigger than the combined GDP of all of the Latin American countries. That gives you an idea of the size of the problem. And every year it increases. And every year the United States increases the trade deficit with everybody, and it increases military spending. So the problem is, how do you address this? And in the last, I think ever since George Bush, they decided that China was the problem. In terms of China was the problem, they have to stop the continuous growth and the continuous economic development of China. And they began this development massively under Barack Obama, who developed what is known as the Asia pivot, which is they concentrate the military forces to surround and encircle China with military forces, military bases, unfriendly countries, and so forth, and so on and so forth, which is the typical technique and tactics the United States uses. And I think if you read between the lines and understand not too much between the lines, sometimes directly, I think they're preparing themselves for some time, at some point in the future, I don't know how, near future or medium-term future, they're preparing to wage war against China to stop it. One of the main problems they have is that they cannot just strike the problem will not be solved by them only stopping China or attacking China. They need to attack China's united front with everybody else in the form of the BRICS, the Belt and Road initiatives, and so on, which China has created quite massively. It's got allies all over the place. In fact, China is the largest trading partner of 140 countries in the world. I think now it's 150 countries in the world. And there are only 199 countries in the world. So that gives you an idea of what the United States wants to confront. Of course, they want to confront it in the wrong way. China has suggested to them so many times, let's collaborate, let's talk to each other, let's see what we can do together. We want everybody to benefit, including ourselves and everybody in the world, in different kind of world, a multipolar world. The United States is completely, against this. So that's the problem. So the Biden administration tried to resolve the problem of China by attacking Russia. And the concept there was to create a war against Russia and then pile up sanctions against Russia to make the economy collapse in 1 month, which will lead, according to their prescription or their calculation, will lead to the political establishment in Russia to get rid of Putin and then produce a more compliant government. This did not work. In fact, Russia is being successful, is winning the war, and its economy, rather than collapsing, actually is being massively strengthened. Now Russia, in terms of PPP, purchasing power, parity power, which is one way of measuring the economy, Russia is the economy number 2 or 3 in the world, which, it wasn't that big before. Even worse from the point of view of the militaristic attitude of the United States, Russia has been able to win this war against 40 military powers in the world, including or led by the United States, which is, very serious from their point of view. So I'm imagine they're pulling their head out, thinking, what the hell do we do? So that was one approach which failed, but Donald Trump, that section of the Republican Party, of the ruling class in the United States, had a different approach, which was, what we need to do is to make Russia friendly to us so that we neutralize in that way, split it from China, and then we attack China, which is what Trump is going to call for. So that means, and this is an important point, at least for me, it's not that Trump doesn't want war and is a pacifier unlike Biden, who is a warmonger. Trump is as warmonger as the other one, but he has a different tactics. And the tactics is he believes that he can sort it out by being friendly to Putin. And it is important because from the point of view of the United States, to maintain their supremacy, they must ensure that this alliance between China and Russia, which is now strategic, and it includes not only economics, but many other things, is split. And he's going to go for that. So in the meantime, he's trying to do two things, and I'll come now to the current questions that most people are seeing in the media, hopefully not in The Guardian. The first thing that Trump is doing is trying to sort out the domestic political structure of the United States to make them completely subservient to him, to the presidency, which was never the case. The amount of autonomy of the various state institutions in the United States is quite important. He controls now the presidency, he controls the Congress, the House of Representatives, he controls the Senate, and even more importantly, he controls the Supreme Court, which is extreme right-wing as much as he is. So now what he's moving towards ensuring that institutions that were traditionally independent in the political US sense, I don't want to exaggerate the point, he's trying to make sure that he purges the Department of Justice and various other departments in the United States so that make them totally compliant to him. And he's sort of accumulating power that will make him like a king, like a monarch. Not identical, but very close to that. He wants to make the state a sort of pro-Trump state rather than a pro-Republican or pro-right-wing state, pro-Trump. And Trump actually dominates the Republican Party intellectually and so on with extreme right-wing policies of every kind. So he began to immediately exert this power internationally. He's changing the United States quite dramatically. I don't have too much time to go into all the details, but they are important to understand this dimension. And then he decided to go for what he prefers as one, as he sees, key mechanism to ensure his economic supremacy. That is to say, the US economic supremacy, which is tariff barriers. That is to say, applying tariff to many countries in the world, particularly those that the United States has trade deficit with, in this case, Canada, Mexico, China, and very soon, I think, very likely, let's see what happens, the European Union, which are the four main sources of the trade deficit of the United States. So that's number one. Number two, from the military point of view, the purchase of Greenland is quite strategically and geostrategically important. If you actually control Greenland militarily, the United States has a significant presence there, then it will be possible to actually go surround Russia and China from the back, not only from the Pacific, but from the top and the back. So that's why he wants it. The population of Greenland is something like 56,000 people. It's a huge territory. It's very close to the United States. So from the point of view of the United States, to militarily dominate it would be, a piece of cake. They would just move in and take it. Who is going to oppose it? 56,000 people is nothing, and not all of them are military. The response of the European Union has been equivocal in the sense it hasn't been as strong as one would expect, but it's getting stronger. I don't know how far they're going to go, and I don't know how far he is prepared to go, Donald Trump, in order to get this. Then the third thing, which is quite important, which is regarding what he sees as an economic matter, is to actually expel immigrants, as many as possible, in order to maintain his political base, which is the white working class. I'm using white working class, a very generic term. It's much more complex than that. But all these people that were left, as it were, in the wash, who do not have employment, they live in ghost towns, They've seen their incomes decline. They've seen their mortgages gone. They've seen their houses gone. They've seen the situation. They have to sell their cars and so on. All of this is quite important. So in order to show to them that actually he means to support them with the similar demagoguery as people use here with Brexit, that is to say, it is the European Union which is forcing quotes of immigrants on the UK that is producing your unemployment in the north, which is not true. And was not true then, and is not true now. So that's the sort of thing that there are. And the number of Latinos, which is the main target of the immigration, expulsion, the number of Latinos that live in the United States is 60 million. And the services sector, an important part of the agricultural sector, depends totally on this cheap labor. In fact, the reason why the United States historically has a very liberal attitude towards the border, even though there are stories they control and so on, but they allow them to come in. If they wanted to stop it, they would stop it. And the reason is, as soon as you arrive illegally into the United States, you claim asylum. And if you claim asylum, your asylum request, asylum applications might take between 5 to 20 years to be processed. In the meantime, the United States ensure that you're able to support yourself, so allows you to a work permit, allows you to live in a house legally, allows you to pay rent, to pay taxes, send your kids to school, and all of the rest of it. In other words, you become a guest worker. And imagine, between 5 to 20 years is clearly a policy designed to ensure that the United States has constant supplies of very cheap labor from the South. That's what it is. And of those 60 million, 70% approximately are Mexican. And in order to expel J.D. Vance, the vice president, talked about expelling 1 million per year, which is gigantic. It's just too much. Nevertheless, he's expelling some of them now. I think that's got to do with domestic politics. We'll see how far he's prepared to go. They've been very nasty in the past anyway. And my problem is, our problem is that the United States, the Democrats have capitulated to these politics, particularly during the electoral campaign. They totally capitulated to the policy of closing the border completely, and therefore justify, what is being done now. If you say no more immigrants should come in, and many of them are illegal, and some of them are criminals and so on, you're justifying what the extreme right wing are doing now. Let's hope that they're able to recover and fight back. Some of them are fighting back. So that's this third point. The fourth point is that in order to maintain the military and economic supremacy, Trump calculated correctly up to some point to regain control over the Panama Canal. They built it themselves, actually. The United States built the Panama Canal. They split Panama from Colombia through external interference in 1903. They created a new country. Panama is made in the USA. The first country to recognize a new country was the United States. Then it passed the first act, the first country to recognize the new country was the United States. And the first decision of the new country was to approve the building of the Panama Canal. By 1914, the Panama Canal was ready. And the United States, had tremendous geopolitical and economic supremacy and a very advantageous situation as a result of that. They lost that in 1999. That's a long story, but they lost it because the Panamanians fought back and made an agreement in 1977, and they eventually got it in 1999. And then he's saying, and it's false, and he knows it's false, Trump. Trump is saying that it's the Chinese who actually run the Panama Canal. This is totally false. The Panama Canal is run by the Panamanian government. So that is another important dimension of the whole story. And the spat with Petro in Colombia is because Petro will not accept that, his compatriots, the people who were expelled, the Colombians who were expelled from the United States, were sent ignominiously and with disrespect in a military plane by the US authority to Bogota, to Colombia. He forced that plane back, and he sent the Colombian plane to bring them back with dignity. And that was the point he made. but he had to accept them, obviously. And some of the media are saying that Petro took a strong stance and they capitulated. This is false, completely false. So how far is he prepared to go? He's already talked about, different from Biden, who said, well, we need to, if one summarizes Biden's policy, let's destroy Gaza. Trump now is saying, let's cleanse it. And he's proposing to send all these people in Gaza to Jordan, to Egypt, and to Indonesia, to whatever other place, which is completely outrageous. I mean, it's really disgusting to even say it. Of course, he's got massive backlash, and he has retreated on that. But I think he wants to push that line to see how far he's going to go. And Biden had introduced a prohibition for the United States to send 2,000 bombs to Israel because they're too destructive. And Trump has just lifted that. So he's preparing for something serious over there. God forbid, let's hope not, but it looks very bad. So now what Trump is going to do, I think, is very likely is going to find a way of trying to get concessions out of Putin regarding the question of the truce and the peace agreement that is going to come as a result of the Ukraine war. And the West and the Europeans are panicking because the one who is dictating the terms, because he's got territorial control and military supremacy, is obviously Putin. And they don't know what to do about that. Nevertheless, this is going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. And the question of demilitarization, that is to say, Russia will not accept that the old NATO establish itself in Ukraine and install nuclear missiles. That has been one. That has been off the table now. And the second target of Putin is to ensure that the country, Ukraine, is denazified. And Zelensky's mandate ended more than a year ago, and he continued to be the president with no explanation and no justification whatsoever. Whereas, anybody who has an election anywhere, the United States criticizes him for not producing the results they want. Whereas in this case, there is no results and they don't give a toss. So that is going to be an important thing to watch. Let's see what happens there. When it comes to the question of Latin America as a whole, I was very surprised that Trump decided to actually send a guy called Grenfell, who is a special envoy, to Caracas to talk to President Maduro, which is extraordinary. Trump was extremely aggressive against Venezuela during his mandate in 2016, 2020. So let's see what comes out of that. My understanding is that any opening that may produce at least a respite between the United States and Venezuela, Maduro is going to take, and he's going to push as far as he goes. That doesn't mean to say that Maduro is either betraying anything or that he's lowering his guard. They know good. They're well equipped politically. I was in Caracas recently and saw what was going on there. They're very equipped politically and they know exactly what they're dealing with. And there's no way, not even an inch, they're going to give anything. But if there is the possibility of negotiation, they certainly go for it and find a modus vivendi with the United States and give them some respite because the economy is recovering and they need that space. The main problem, is my view, is that the United States over the last period have been deploying military bases in many places that they didn't have. The main one has been in Ecuador, in the Galapagos Islands, where they didn't have any, and is illegal according to the Ecuadorian constitutions to establish military bases there, but they did. They established military bases in Argentina. They have 10 military bases in Colombia. They have military bases in the Bahamas. They have military bases in the Caribbean. They have military bases in El Salvador. They established a new one in Guyana, which, the issue is being militarized by the United States, which is extremely dangerous and problematical. But Venezuela is not going to fall into any provocation. So finally, just to finish this nasty story, we in Latin America are very unlucky because we cohabit in a continent where we have the worst monster ever, namely the United States, and we share the same continent. Nevertheless, we have significant gains politically in the form of Mexico, in the form of Lula in Brazil. Certainly, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua have been able to resist. And we went in Honduras recently, and there are several oases of interesting possibilities there. But the United States has military bases in many places it can. And from the point of view of the US recovery, I don't think it's crucial, but it's important that they're able to actually get back the oil from Venezuela. If you think about it, the oil from the Middle East to the United States takes 45 days. The oil from Venezuela to the United States takes 4 days. So the United States is thinking, my God, there's all this oil there. This pesky government of Bolivarian government is preventing us from doing what we want. And Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the planet. So that's quite an important one. Let's see how far this goes. So it needs the oil. 62% of the reserves of lithium in the planet are in Latin America: Chile, Bolivia, Argentina, and Mexico. So from the point of view of the United States trying to pounce on these resources, this is a key continent. They cannot do this in Europe because Europe is very poor in resources. And Asia is out of the question because they haven't got the possibility to do the same. They can only intervene militarily in the Middle East, and there is only oil there, no more. And that's a serious problem for them. So Latin America continues to be strategically important for them. A final point is, and I'll finish with this, is as he announced a tariff of 25% on import from Mexico and 25% on imports coming from Canada and 10% on income coming from China, the Canadians and the Mexicans are already going to retaliate with tariff of 25% on import from the United States, both countries already. And China already issued a statement, the Ministry of Foreign Commerce issued a statement saying they regret this. It's a pity that the United States had to resort to this, which is illegal, and it's against the World Trade Organization rules and so on, but that they will reply appropriately. Last time, in 2017 and 18, when the United States waged a trade war against China, the Chinese retaliated, and the United States suffered enormously, much more than China. China was able to take it because it has got huge resources. The United States can't. And what they did last time, they targeted Republican states, which damaged them politically as well as economically in self-defense. God knows what they're going to do now. And I'm waiting to hear from the European Union because they threatened to apply sanctions to them. The Europeans need, a spine, and they don't have it. So we have to all be prepared to really be ready to resort to activity and denunciations and so on, and keep an eye on things, because the situation as the United States elected Trump is going to get very bumpy. I'll leave it there. Thank you. Ready to answer any question if any there is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francisco. That was an amazing roundup of the whole world and the region, of course. I know there's a lot of news going out generally about the Russia somehow economy is failing, which is contrary to what you've predicted there. And I'm sure your sources of information are much better than is coming out. But I just wanted to say there's something there that's going on. They're continually pushing the line that Russia is in trouble. Russia's economy is suffering, he's getting unpopular and so on. We know the usual tricks of the papers. But for our region now, we're more concerned right now about Panama and the threats that have been made of Panama. We've drafted a letter to send to the CARICOM government demanding that they speak up on behalf of Panama and other measures. We will circulate that letter soon. You'll get to see it. And yeah, so I wondered if you had any thoughts about, well, actually, what's the position of the CARICOM governments at the moment? Have they been making any noises in support that you're aware of?
I think the CARICOM countries, so I don't mean to be disrespectful, I think they're scared. And, they're rightly so, because they're small countries. They depend very heavily on external sources of revenue. And if the United States were to apply the pressure and stop, say, tourism coming into one of these countries, and the economy will collapse. If the United States were to decide not to continue with some aid that exists, then again, if the United States were to apply protectionism and say your pineapples, your bananas, whatever it is that your coffee that you're reporting to us, we'll stop it completely 100%, which because it's not much in terms of the volume, then the United States has plenty of weapons. I think the CARICOM are waiting for the bigger countries, Brazil, Argentina. Well, Argentina does not count. Brazil, Venezuela, Mexico, and so on, to respond to say we can come behind it. Already there was an attempt to call the meeting of CELAC, the Commonwealth of Latin American and Caribbean states, which is a new institution that was established under Chavez, that does not include the United States and does not include Canada. And it was called and then it was cancelled because there was no consensus. And they want to discuss precisely these threats from Trump. So that is a part of the weakness on our part. So I think CARICOM is going to wait to see how things develop. But you can be certain that it will be a very strong response from, well, certainly from Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum has been absolutely magnificent. Said, we are not going to take this and we'll fight you all the way. And Lula has already announced if they were to apply tariffs to Brazil, we'll retaliate as well immediately right away. And Canada, extraordinary, because Canada is a complete lackey of the US politically and even economically. It's like a colony. It's already replied they're not going to accept this. So things look beginning to shape up. Let's see how far they go. And I wouldn't expect and I wouldn't pressure the Caribbean governments to come out with things because it will expose them unnecessarily. It's too early and too premature. You don't spend your ammunition in the first charge. You wait for things to be better, and then you should. Sorry to use the military analogy there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. We've got one question up. Joseph, you want to unmute and put your question to? I don't see any questions in the chat. People can put questions in the chat as well, and I should read them out. But for now, Joseph.
Yeah, there are many questions I would like to ask. There are many questions I'd like to ask, but I know I can't ask all of them. But one of the things that have troubled me is the kind of news we get about the thing between Brazil and Venezuela. The news always say, well, Brazil doesn't recognize Maduro because of the election and so on. Do you think that there's actual truth in that, and also would that impact? Another thing is, earlier in this week, I asked the foreign minister of Grenada about the situation in Cuba, squeezing of Cuba and also Venezuela. And he said that they would oppose that, at least Grenada, and maybe CARICOM would oppose it because countries are sovereign and they should be allowed to function as they wish. So, but I agree with you, there's a bit of cowardice on the part of CARICOM overall, because they do not come out in a unified way or even individually about what is going on, which they should. Especially when we already hear, the situation of nationals from the Caribbean being shipped back to the Caribbean. And also in Puerto Rico, there was a video this week that says that they are deporting Dominican Republic citizens from Puerto Rico. Can you respond to some of those? So what I say, I hope I'm clear enough. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, Brazil. Can I answer, right? Yeah. Brazil. I'm not sure. I don't want to speculate too much as to why it's behaving the way it is, but it is. First, they did not recognize the result of the election in July 2024. I was an observer to the election myself. I was there, and normal election, absolutely impeccable as always. And typically the opposition did not recognize the result because they lost, and they've done this for 25 years. So there's nothing new under the sun. When you win the election and you have the evidence, you lodge a complaint to the electoral authority, and say, this is it. And when you read the newspapers, when you read the media, the international media, they all say there was fraud, but none of it indicate how. They just claim, they just repeat what the opposition says, which has been the case ever since 1999 in the case of Venezuela. So Brazil did not recognize it. And then Venezuela, was quite patient and quite tolerant. It didn't say much. And then the key advisor on foreign affairs to the president in Brazil, whose name is Celso Amorim, I think is the key architect of this rejection. Very soon it was totally clear that the opposition actually had invented the thing, because 2 days after the opposition claimed, more than 2 days, something like a week after the opposition claimed they won the election, the United States, Antony Blinken, State Secretary, recognized their victory. And then next day they withdrew it because they knew they didn't have any actual evidence. The United States has never, ever before withdrew a recognition of a government they want to recognize if that's the case. And for the first time ever. So it's a clear indication there was weakness. And this began to weaken the position of Brazil. And the matter has been sorted out diplomatically. I don't have all the details, and certainly it's been very discreet diplomacy between the two sides. Venezuela sent an ambassador to Brazil, and he was received by this government of Brazil and presented his credentials to the government, and these were recognized. That is to say, the government of Venezuela was recognized. And even better, on the 10th of January, when President Maduro was inaugurated, I was there as well. I was invited to participate, to assist, not to participate, to witness that. Brazil sent a special envoy to be part of the inauguration. So, and then Breno Alman, who is a Brazilian intellectual journalist, interviewed Maduro a few days ago and asked him specifically, what about your relationship, Venezuela and Brazil? And Maduro said, it's all sorted, not to worry. We'll say more later on. So it makes sense. I mean, Brazil can sell huge amount of stuff to Venezuela. Venezuela can assist Brazil in many other areas and so on. And, the complementarity of the two economies will be excellent. When it comes to the question of Cuba, I think Cuba is the one that is under tremendous pressure. The position of Cuba is very dramatically bad. I think there are, perhaps, this is an exaggeration, they're hanging on from the fields of their fingernails. It's really bad. The good thing about Cuba is that the population is sufficiently conscious not to engage in, outbursts. Because if they were, then there would be regime change right away, because the United States is always present to try to organize it. But the endurance of things is quite dramatic. And one of the mechanisms of solution to the hardship that the Cuban population has suffered is immigration. More than 1 million have emigrated to the United States and other places, which, alleviates rather the problem. But nevertheless, the problem is still there. And the key reason is a combination of two things. The key reason for the crisis Cuba faces is a combination of two things. Number one, the United States applied all the pressure, weaponized completely the tourism industry, which is the one they depended very heavily on, and they recovered out of that massively, and the pandemic, which led to a fall in tourism in Cuba by 94%. So that was catastrophic. And they haven't been able to recover. Last year, they expected to reach 4 or 5 million, which is the highest point that they got, and they got only 2 million. So in other words, they had a shortfall of something like 50% of what they calculated. And then they haven't got fuel. And if you compare Venezuela and Cuba, Venezuela is very rich in resources, in assets. Venezuela has everything. It had iron, it has oil, it had gas, it had gold, you know, you name it, they have it. Cuba has sunshine and very little else. And, you know, a very conscious, very well-educated population. In other words, Cuba has human capital, but it cannot sell that to the world, you know, in terms of international trade. So that's the reason why they're weak, and that's why they are being attacked so badly. And the people who are being deported from Puerto Rico is not Puerto Ricans, but is Dominicans who are living illegally in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is U.S. territory, whatever their status. And that's why there is a lot of them that have been expelled. We'll see how far the United States is going to go with this, but it's beginning to create serious problem because I think Trump made a political mistake. He sent something like 30,000, or he's going to send something like 30,000, you know, of these illegal immigrants to Guantanamo, where they used to have these special people from the Middle East that was completely illegal, was outrageous and so on. So there is a backlash already coming in from within the United States itself. Judges and others, politicians are saying, how can you do this? You know, these are people, are illegal people. These are dreamers who come to the United States because they want a better living. And what you're doing is discrediting our country completely by going back to that horror. So Trump may come back or may retreat on that, but then, nevertheless, what he's doing is not popular at all anywhere in the world. You know, you name it, the Greenland Purchase, the Panama Canal, the illegal immigrants, the tariffs, everything is going to be. And the one thing about the tariff, which I didn't mention, is going to produce massive inflation in the United States, which is really hitting the population very badly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Francisco. We'll close on this session on two questions that are in the chat. One is not yet. One is about what's your take on the UK's response to Trump, and the other one, what's your take on the Americans bombing of the pipeline? Do you think they're responsible for destroying the Russian pipeline that was bringing gas and oil? As brief as you can make this.
Yeah, let me answer the question of the gasoduct, which is the gas coming from Russia to Germany. And so that's the one we're talking about. Because of legal reason, I'll put it this way. If the United States were to decide to do it, they have the capacity and the ability and the willingness to do it. And the investigations so far have indicated there is nobody else that could have done it except them. So that's my answer to that. And it makes sense politically because the last thing the United States wanted, and I think that's why possibly it was carried out, is that cheap energy was fueling industrial and economic development in the whole of Europe, especially Germany. And that would have become an alliance over the long term. And the United States cannot lose Europe. It's quite prepared to destroy it before losing it. And by destroying it, it also weakens itself. So that's why I think there is a logic in terms of, you know, the need perhaps to blow up I'm not sure whether Starmer got spine strengthened recently. It seems to be, you know, putting up with some interesting statement. Let's see how far it lasts. After all, the United Kingdom militarily is an appendage, not economically, but militarily is an appendage of the United States. It was created, you know, as a result of 1944 in Bretton Woods and the arrangement after post-war, and all the military apparatus, everything is associated or dependent or integrated into the US system. And every single adventure of the United States, with very few exceptions, around the world, the UK is always there centrally. And it's got, you know, military power. The US, the United Kingdom has military power. So let's see what happens with this thing. But the defense of the national interest, the UK national interest by Starmer, leaves a lot to be desired. So I'm afraid I have to say that it might not last.
Great. Thank you very much, Francisco. Very informed discussion, and thanks for all the questions that came in. I'm sure people will join me in applauding you and say thank you very much.
My pleasure.
to
Thank
this
you very much
session.
for inviting me.
Thank you, Francis. Now we'll have the second half of the session. So we're gonna have executive member for CLS and also Grenada Human Rights Group. We'll have Kwabena take the floor, please.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Francisco. Thank you very much. Before I begin, I'd like to say two very brief things. In relation to Britain's military role in support of the US, on a personal level, and this isn't CLS's position, but on a personal level, I wish our country stops being like the snotty-nosed kid in the gang that follows and joins the bully in their bullying. I just wish we would have the spine of even the Harold Wilson government that refused to join America in the Vietnam adventure. Secondly, on the question of whether the US would bomb an energy supply of one of its closest allies, Germany, for its own benefit, I would say this thing. I'm old enough, just about, to remember when British Leyland, the British bus company, had sold buses to the new Cuban government. And by some mysterious means, the ship carrying these buses was blown up in a British port, and these buses were prevented from going to Cuba. The question to ask is, cui bono? Who benefits? Here in the Baltic Sea, the most surveilled place on the planet, it appears that no one in NATO knows who did this foul deed. But there you go, it will come out in the end. Anyhow, I've been given this fulsome praise by Luke of being a member of the exalted executive of Caribbean Labour Solidarity. And my talk today is CLS's call for the government to return or allow Shamima Begum to return to her home here in the United Kingdom. I believe that this cause is very important for everyone in the UK, hence CLS's statement on it. Some will say that her case has no relevance to what CLS is about. We say that it is very, very much what we are about. We in CLS are against injustice, against racism, and for humanity. And the Shamima Begum case has at its center all three of this. In my case, on a personal level, I was made fully aware of the effects of stripping a person of the rights that they have when I was gifted this book by one of our comrades, one of our members, David Horsley. For those of you who didn't catch it, it's called The Yellow Spot, The Extermination of the Jews in Germany. This book itself was printed, I think, in 1935. It's an original copy. And when I read it, I was mortified, but I wasn't, because I can say to you, it details the steps taken by the Nazis when they took power in Germany. Within a year, they had stripped the German Jews of all their rights and made them figures of racial hatred. Now, I don't think the Labour Party is a precursor to the Nazis or the right-wingers in Britain, but it only needs a first step. And the stripping by ethnic minority cabinet ministers of the citizenship of Shamima Begum should be a warning to us. What's the background to this case? In 2015, three young British schoolgirls, Shamima Begum, Khadija Sultana, and Amira Abbasi, just age 15 at the time, were groomed by ISIS agents and encouraged to travel to Syria to join ISIS, also known as Islamic State. a terrorist group. I think we all know that. Khadija and Amira are reported to have tragically perished in circumstances which remain unclear as yet, leaving Shamima Begum as the sole survivor of the trio. Miss Begum remains detained in the Al Rouj camp in northern Syria after the military defeat of ISIS and following the revocation of her UK citizenship in 1929, such an action being conducted by an ethnic minority Home Secretary in a previous government. There are concerns that the actions leading to their travel were known to international intelligence networks, including the UK's. This knowledge and subsequent inaction highlights the failure to protect these and other young citizens under the Children Act 1989, which mandates the safeguarding of those at risk. As of December of last year, about 65 United Kingdom citizens with alleged link to ISIS are detained in Syria, or I should read that as formerly United Kingdom citizens. Those including Shamima Begum. Amongst those detainees are estimated to be 30 to 60 British children held in camps such as Al-Hoj and Al-Roj in northeast Syria. We also understand that the British aid worker Takir Sharif, whose citizenship was revoked in 2017, is also detained in Syria. The average age of adult detainees varies, but many were in their teens or early 20s at the time of their travel to Syria. These children, referred to above, are now believed to be between infancy and early adolescence. They were either taken to Syria by their parents or were born there. Again, on a personal level, during the period of liberation struggle in South Africa, I think to myself, when I think about Shamima Begum and the foolish actions that they took, that I might have been tempted had the ANC and other liberation movements had a recruitment campaign in the United Kingdom to travel to South Africa to help in the liberation of the people in South Africa and in Zimbabwe. Maybe, and I cannot speak for them, Shamima, Khadija, and Amira thought that they were engaged too in a liberation struggle and foolishly succumbed to the blandishments of these people who were grooming them. Now, what are the issues here? Shamima and the others were minors when they were radicalized and coerced by ISIS. The decision to strip them of their citizenship raises ethical and legal concerns, particularly when it disproportionately affects individuals of ethnic minority backgrounds. The action was harsh. It was cruel. It was in certain respects spiteful. Such harsh actions foster unease among citizens born abroad or to immigrant parents, eroding trust in the government's commitment to equality. We, of course, have our international obligations as a nation, and under the United Nations Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness, the United Kingdom must not render individuals stateless. Despite the protestations of previous United Kingdom governments, the Bangladeshi government, which the United Kingdom government has said, she's not stateless. She has got Bangladeshi parents who have not revoked their citizenship, so she can apply to become a Bangladeshi citizen under their rights, like many Caribbean states, of being a descendant of a Bangladeshi person. Well, the Bangladeshi government says, no, she cannot. Because of her actions and her activities, she's an undesirable person in Bangladesh. So even if she applies, we will not have her, which is, says the Bangladeshi government, our right. Just as any of our Caribbean governments can say to our children and grandchildren, well, thank you very much for applying for citizenship, but we don't really want you, thank you. And so the British government said this at a time when they did not know the actions or the reactions of the Bangladeshi government. So they were being a little incorrect in their understanding of the situation. What about justice and rehabilitation? The government has said that Shamima Begum presents such a threat to United Kingdom security that it is their duty to protect the citizens of the United Kingdom from her, because although it is unknown, they reasonably suspect that she could be up to some tricks when she gets here and poses a danger. There is a case. That is right. She does possibly present, if she is unreformed, a danger to British citizens were she to return to the United Kingdom. But we're strongly of the view that if she has committed any crimes in Syria or elsewhere, she and others should face trial in the United Kingdom under British law, ensuring justice is upheld transparently. Now, it ill behoves the United Kingdom to not only revoke the citizenship of these individuals and deny them the opportunity to return to Britain and possibly face trial and judicial sanction, but also deny justice to those that they are alleged to have harmed. Was she involved in the killing of British citizens that were cruelly cruelly shown on YouTube, being killed by the so-called Beatles? Was she involved in that? What about the family of those victims? Do they not deserve to see someone put on trial for that? If that is the evidence that Britain has, then we should bring her home and put her on trial. It is noted that the majority of European countries and other countries have returned their position. Why does this matter? Well, we believe not only about national security. We're not mad. We don't think that we don't care about national security. Let's be bleeding heart liberals, and whatever anyone has done, bring them back to the United Kingdom so they can carry out their nefarious deeds here. No, we want to live. It's about upholding the principles of justice, compassion, and fairness that defines British society. Why do you think people want to come to Britain? It is for these values that they want to come here. Repatriating individuals such as Shamima provides an opportunity to demonstrate that the United Kingdom values rehabilitation and the rule of law over punitive and spiteful measures that appear also arbitrary and vindictive. We affirm in Caribbean Labour Solidarity that citizenship is a fundamental right to a person's identity, security, and sense of belonging. For migrants, particularly ourselves, I am a migrant to this country, our parents and their descendants, particularly those from the Caribbean and other Commonwealth countries, as well as their descendants, represents a vital connection to the United Kingdom, a place built upon their history, labour, and cultural contributions. We have committed to Britain. We're here. Every day that we go out to work, we are building Britain. That is our commitment. We're not fifth columnists ready to destroy Britain. Our children, our relatives are in positions across the state, doing valuable work in hospitals, in local government, and in private business. The United Kingdom's decision to revoke Shamima Begum's citizenship is deeply concerning. It instills fear amongst migrants and their descendants, particularly in the light of the Windrush scandal. Do we remember? It was only a little while ago, but we've almost forgotten. Here the government declared people who have lived in this country for 50 years not to have a right to be in this country. They were denied the rights that they had earned through paying their national insurance and their taxes. They were having to sleep on sofas, in some cases having to sleep in the street. Others, when they tried to return from holidays or emergency trips to the Caribbean, were denied entry onto aircrafts and had to spend a terrible period of time in their country, in Grenada, in Jamaica, living lives of impoverishment because their families couldn't support them, or they did not have families to give them that support. What a terrible history. that Britain has created over the Windrush scandal. Here, the systematic failures led to the wrongful detention and deportation of many Caribbean people. The ability to strip citizenship, especially from someone born in the United Kingdom, like Shamima Begum, raises serious questions about fairness and equality under the law, and instills fear. Because if they could do that against a 15-year-old girl born in Bethnal Green, and they could do what they're doing, and what they did to people who were living here more than 50 years, what steps does it take to go further and maybe at some time end up like the Jews of Germany? I don't want to frighten anyone, and I'm not saying it's going to happen or it's going to happen tomorrow. But if you don't stop it now, that thing can build into an avalanche at some time in the future. Revocation of citizenship must remain an extraordinary measure, reserved for cases of clear and significant harm to the public. In Miss Begum's case, court proceedings were held in secret, due, the government claimed, to the nature of the evidence, leaving the public unable to assess the government's claim. This lack of transparency undermines trust in the legal process and raises concerns about potential overreach. Now, I'm not saying that the government didn't have evidence which justified its actions. It may have done, but clearly, if it has such evidence, there must be a method by which it can say to us and the rest of the world, of the citizenship of this country, this is why we're doing this on your behalf. And so far, they haven't. We believe that the government's actions appears disproportionate and fails to address the responsibility to protect individuals vulnerable to exploitation, such as those groomed by ISIS. Additionally, targeting Begum based upon the tenuous links to her parents' country of origin seems unjust and should likely not have been applied, would not have been applied to a white British citizen in similar circumstances. We have a call to action. To you, we call upon you to spread this message around. We call for a just and equitable approach to citizenship that prevents statelessness or other similar sanctions and ensures that no individual is unfairly targeted due to their heritage and circumstances. And we call upon this government, to facilitate the immediate repatriation of Shamima Begum and similarly situated former British citizens currently in Syria. Ensure that they are given access to fair trials if there are charges against them. Provide avenues for their rehabilitation, reintegration, and support to resume their lives as part of the United Kingdom society. This troubling case, this is my final point. This troubling case presents an opportunity for us, through the government, to reaffirm the United Kingdom's commitment to justice and human rights. We hope that they will consider this appeal that we have made and take the necessary steps to correct past oversights and demonstrates Britain's enduring values. Now, in closing, we have written a similar letter to the Prime Minister and to the Foreign Secretary, our estimable David Lammy, calling for them to take into account our pleas. And it is a case which does not carry much sympathy, because Begum appears to be a very nasty piece of work. She doesn't appear to have much in the way of something that you could call as a sympathy vote. Nevertheless, that is why we must strive more to get her to return to the United Kingdom. The people who do the worst deeds or alleged to have done the worst deeds are the ones that we must work our hardest to see that they're given fairness in any process that they undergo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kwabena. I can hear the passion in your voice for this injustice that has happened, and I share that with you very much because I've been following through my other work really about the treatment of children in this country, and they've got a terrible, terrible record. They've dropped something to like 20-something of the top nations in terms of looking after children or children's happiness. We've seen the outcry over the two-child policy, the conservative government, which, Starmer's refused to budge on. I heard Lammy blaming the Tottenham riots on the government taking away the right for parents to hit the children as one of the reasons that we've had that disturbance. So, we're faced with a government that doesn't seem to care much or understand much about children, and the whole children in this country are falling way behind in terms of poverty and all kinds of care. We've seen all the scandals around rape and child grooming and abuse. It's just really horrendous. But we will continue to fight for the right for us to, remain in this country, regardless of whether we have 2 passports or not. We've got a couple of questions up. I don't have a question to put to you, but there's a couple of questions. We've got Ben Stevenson first, and then we've got Dr. Liz Okokun. Yep. So Ben.
Hi, yeah, thanks. That was great, and like you say, the passion really came through there. I think I was sort of saying, I think most of us think that citizenship is something that's inviolate. Certainly I do, or like to think it is. There's sort of that Roman citizen, I can still go anywhere and say I'm a citizen of Rome, and there's still that sense of in Britain that you can go anywhere and flash your British passport, and the idea that any government can take that away, I think that in and of itself is a dangerous precedent, and it does require a response. And I think you're right it's very difficult for us to judge from afar the specifics of her case. That's what we have the legal system for. And if we're not subjecting them to the legal system, it strikes me as kind of our Guantanamo. It's sort of admitting a failure and a defeat to say that our legal system isn't capable of dealing with these people. It's like, well, then we need to probably do something about our legal system, don't we? So I think there was a question in there. I suppose my question is, what can we practically do about this in the campaign, given that we could probably expect that pleas to Keir Starmer and David Lammy might not be receptive?
Well, the first thing that we need to do is to publicize the issue. Not publicize the issue on the basis that Shamima is this innocent, dewy-eyed girl who was going over there to offer medical aid and assistance, but rather take it away from that, because I think that one is a bit of a dead end. We do not know what Shamima did. We certainly may know or believe that she was groomed and induced into going, but we do not know. But we could publicize and see if such publicity takes effect. We could ask our MPs and even our councillors in those areas where you have councillors who are receptive to raise the matter. Just raising the matter can bring about change. Again, not on the basis that Shamima is innocent and should come back and just start off as if nothing has happened, but rather, if she has done something, she must be subjected to justice in this country. We cannot foist her justice on the Syrian people, who I think everyone must appreciate are going through tremendous problems now, and it would be impractical for them to try and bring her to justice in Syria. So those are the things that we could do. Now, to answer a question that you haven't asked, but which you hinted at, we do not know why the British government has held this case in camera, as they say, in secret. It could be that by publicizing some of the issues that led to Shamima Begum and others traveling to Syria, it compromises some of Britain's intelligence operations. Now, I am not going to speculate, but I'm going to read something. And whilst not speculating as to the nature of ISIS, as some have, for example, I do not know if ISIS were funded by the United States Security Services under a scheme authorized by President Obama called Timber Sycamore, as claimed by Tulsi Gabbard, the prospective director of national intelligence under Trump, albeit under Trump, but said in a Senate hearing, because it's not really relevant to this meeting, but will no doubt be disclosed eventually. If that is the case, we now know definitely that the various movements that overthrew or collapsed the Syrian government were funded by NATO countries, including Britain. If ISIS was funded, as Tulsi Gabbard has clearly stated, I have seen the evidence that she gave to the Senate committee, or rather, I've seen clips of the evidence that she gave to the Senate committee investigating her appointment, then Britain is part of that. And Britain knew that she was traveling, that Shamima Begum and the others, not just the other two young women, but others were traveling to Syria, because ISIS then becomes an agent for British foreign policy in its dealings against the Syrian government of Assad. And that is tremendously embarrassing. Now, I'm not saying that I believe any of this, but if they do not wish to pony up with what they know, all speculation will take place. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we got 3 more hands up. Dennot, we'll start with Dr. Liz. Will you come on, please? Take the floor.
Hi, Dr. Liz.
How are you, my brother? Are you
Okay.
keeping well?
Okay.
My neighbour, nice to hear you. We've had this debate in my family as well. And I remember going across London to a Labour Party meeting about support for Shamima. And I was quite adamant, and I can hear the passion in your voice as well. But I do feel that we have some kind of timidity about this because the person is a criminal. If a person is a criminal, doesn't mean that we love them and we want to hug and kiss them. We want them to see justice. And justice is not blunt instrument, it is a very sharp instrument. And, you know, my justice and say a Saudi Arabian justice and say a Nigerian justice are not the same. But being born here, I feel that it's my right and the country's duty to see justice done for me and to me based on my nationality, being British or being born British. And I think, you know, we must be clear about the call for justice, no matter what the person has done. And I know I might be conflating other things, but the murder of I'd say murder of Chris Kaba, who we find out after the policeman gets off, was a naughty boy. Okay, he was involved in grooming and all sorts of things, but nevertheless, the child, this young man, there was no shoot to kill policy in this country, so they had no right to shoot to kill him. He should have faced justice like any of our children. That could have been my child, because my child worked outside the place where, worked inside the place where he got killed outside. And that could have been my child. It wouldn't be acceptable, no matter what he had done. The same with Excel Raden Kwabena, so I can't say his name properly, the young man from Wales who was murdered the children in Southport. I do feel it's important that we recognise the failures of the state when it comes to young Black people, young Black men and women, the criminalising and the adultification of them both. You know, Shamima was a child when she left. She was multiply raped, because in Britain, anybody who has that sort of relationship with a minor is a rapist. So she was being coercively controlled and multiply raped. I hope it's not, I'm not triggering anybody, but that is, she's as much a victim as she is a criminal. And if you become a victim, like Axel, you become a criminal if you become victimized. He was racially excluded, he racially abused by his classmates, and then excluded from school, the only place where children should feel safe and should be allowed to be educated and supported. Okay, so when it comes to justice, we need our children to be given the same justice, no matter what their crimes, as if they're as any other person in the country. And I'm really concerned that we're most of the people in Caribbean Label Solidarity are elders to me. I'm no disrespect to any of you, but we need to be fighting this fight very loudly, because we won't be here 30 years from now. We might be, but we might not be. And it's our next generation. If they're seen as aliens now, what are they going to be seen as if the next opposition is reform, which is taking over the Tories as we speak? And if the Labour Party, which we were quite right to be concerned about when they were standing for election, if they aren't standing for socialist values now, when are they going to stand for them? So I think it's important that we fight for people's justice, even if they are criminals. And I wonder what your opinion is in how we have this argument with our young people. Thank you, Luke, and thank you, Kwabena. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Liz, for raising those issues there, because I think they're really pertinent to the whole discussion that we're having, you know, and especially the adultification of the young ones, and we see how that transpired with Child Q. And yes, and with the case you mentioned just now.
Yeah, I see her as similar to Child Q, because we don't know
Yeah.
what Child Q did, but they still are a child, and they should not have been exposed to that sort of treatment.
Yeah, it's really ridiculous. Okay, Kwabena, you want to come in?
Yes, very, very quickly. Dr. Liz, you have hit it on the head. The critique that people had made that this is none of CLS's business to be engaged with bringing attention to the plight of a Bangladeshi child in Syria. Well, you have clearly outlined why it is. But I think there is an even worse situation in the so-called West. There is what, in my mind, is a normalization of hatred. Yes, there is. In the sense that if you look at all of the pronouncements of the leader of the West, President Trump, not one of his decrees is positive. Not one of his decrees brings relief to the American people, white, black, Hispanic, or other. It is all about hatred. Hatred for this group, hatred for that. An airline has a collision with a helicopter over the Potomac River. It is because the Federal Aviation Authority has hired disabled people. That's what he said. Totally misunderstanding equalities legislation in America. What are we going to do about the economic situation? We're going to deport people who are here in the United States. We are going to put 30,000 of them in Guantanamo, a disgusting things that were done when the United States engaged in kidnapping, called extraordinary rendition. It now looks as if we've gone on to full normalization of hatred. And maybe Shamima's case was part of the beginning of this normalization of hatred. My recollection is that the only time that citizenship was withdrawn is when you had someone who was a citizen of another country, arrived in Britain, and then was granted British citizenship, and they did something egregious. I have not known of any example of a British citizen, a citizen born here, and has naturally become a British citizen, being denied their citizenship. Will a white person from Pontefract, who goes and does something terrible in, say, Thailand, be denied their citizenship? Have it removed? No. So I think we in CLS have that duty. And I'm saying to all of you, please take this message about Shamima, but concentrate on what it means, which is stop this normalization of hatred. I'm finished, Luke. You are muted. You are muted, Luke. Unmute yourself, Luke.
What you say, Luke? And I'm thinking, oh, I'm busy calling Laura to the floor. Laura, are you there? Yeah, I'm so sorry. Come in.
Didn't yell loud enough. I couldn't hear you. When I first came to Britain, which was in 1968, I was very involved in the ANC for reasons I won't go into my life story. But at that point, anyone who came to England or Britain who was stateless, who was stateless because they'd been thrown out of their country, was allowed in, not necessarily given citizenship, but allowed in. And there was a whole community of South Africans, because at that point, the only two countries that took away your citizenship as a matter of course, if you were a political, if you disagreed politically, were South Africa and the Soviet Union. I didn't know of any other country. In the United States, in the 20s, there were thousands of people who were rounded up and sent back to the country that they came from, usually Russia. These were friends of my grandparents and what have you, because they were seen as, well, they were members of the Communist Party or the burgeoning Communist Party at that point. So this taking away of citizenship is not new, but it is something that I think has to be fought. And it's the same in the States now. I mean, I'm sure you followed Trump saying that he wants to take away citizenship from people who were born in the United States. For how long is the United States? 17, 18, 19, 200 and odd years. If you were born in the United States, you were a citizen. Didn't matter what your parents were, didn't matter what your grandparents were, you were a citizen. He wants to take that away. Now, whether he'll be able to do it, I don't know. But it puts even people like me in a difficult position. I have 2 passports. I am, well, I might as well everybody, I'm sure people who know me know, I am a member of the Communist Party, and I have been since I was very young. So if the United States really wanted to get rid of me and take away my citizenship, I'm sure Trump would be able to do it if he's allowed to do it. So everybody, I think, who has two passports, everybody who has citizenship other than, you know, the one they were born with, if their country doesn't take it away, really needs to be a little bit afraid of what might happen, particularly with the kind of government we have at the moment. And you know, Shamima Begum, it has not been shown or proven in any way that she's done anything particularly wrong, except go to where they were fighting a war. And don't forget, she lost 3 children before she was 17. You know, all 3 of her children died. They would have, presumably, they might have even had the possibility of the British citizenship had she been brought back here. Her 3rd child died when there was a possibility of her coming back to Britain after the war was over, because she didn't have access to medical care. And there's a part of me, anyway, that whatever it is she's done, if she's done anything, and to my knowledge, and I've read everything there is to read about this, nobody has yet given any kind of real evidence that she was involved in anything except bringing up her children, and being involved in bringing up her children. Her husband, yes, but she's not responsible for her husband's misdemeanors or malfeasances. She's only responsible for her own. And to my knowledge, she spent the first 3 years getting married, having children, and watching them die. And for no other reason than that, I feel sorry for her. And I think, you know, I would like to see her brought back and tried if there's anything to try her for. But I also think politically we have to be very careful. Even during the McCarthy period, and I'm old enough to remember the end of the McCarthy period. I wasn't alive during I wasn't born during the beginning of it. Well, I guess I was. But I was old enough to remember some of the bits. My math teacher, for instance, lost his job along with 20 other teachers in Philadelphia because they refused to testify. They refused to name names of people who were in the Communist Party. They lost their jobs, but they didn't lose their citizenship. And there was no way it could be taken away because nobody, to my knowledge, no one except Trump has ever even suggested taking citizenship away from people for any reason if you were born in the United States because of the Constitution. Personally, I don't think Trump is going to be able to get away with it, or at least I'm crossing my fingers, thumbs, eyes, and every other part of me that has 2, that even this extreme right-wing Supreme Court wouldn't let him get away with that. But I do think it's important that everybody who's in the position of having 2 citizenships be part of this project, because I think we're all in danger. Doesn't matter what color we are, except politically.
Thank you so much, Laura. I think for most British Commonwealth citizens or people who came from the Commonwealth would have that problem, because I think a lot of the Commonwealth countries, you can have 2 passports. Okay, Kwabena, I'll let you take Frank now, and then you can respond to both questions. Frank Murray, are you ready there?
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, when you talk about grooming, there are several ways you can be grooming, and one is like state grooming. For instance, I was trying to remember the dates that it happened, but I can't really find it. I was trying to find evidence, but I could remember when the Syrian thing was going on, and the government was there encouraging people to get involved, to get send clothes, and also from their action, they were encouraging people to go and help. Now, I think the true nature of ISIS wasn't quite clear at that time, but I could remember government ministers on TV encouraging people to go and take part in the actions that was going on over there. So I suppose one of the reasons you can think that they actually did the trial off air or off camera is because this thing, the government themselves was complicit in getting people to go and get involved in that the conflict over there. And I think they are quite implicit in the whole thing. Keep it off here, and you wouldn't be able to get the evidence to accuse them. But it's out there. Thank you.
You're muted again, Luke.
But you guessed what I was saying. Do you want to respond? Come.
Okay. Before I respond, in the chat, Paul, our Jamaican correspondent, has put a link to the buses that were sabotaged before they could go to the new Cuban government. So please have a look at that. Michael Boateng, a very dear friend of mine, has made the point that citizenship has been taken away by the government on a regular basis. I don't know if he follows my thesis that if you are a naturally born British citizen, that has been taken away. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if he wants to do that. Ben has suggested that maybe we could link up, or I could create links with the Tower Hamlets Trades Council, presumably to see if there is a campaign that we can affiliate to perhaps or support regarding Shamima Begum's return, and possibly the repatriation of the remains of the others. Right, so in terms of what you have said, Frank, about the secrecy of the trial, it is only when a government is going to be politically embarrassed that they resort to secret trials. It is quite clear that in other trials, you do not disclose the nature of your agents, because obviously that will put them in danger. And those particular types of civil servants are important to us, and we can't have their lives being put in danger. But in this case, if, as Tulsi Gabbard, the possibly new head of national security in America, has said that the United States and possibly the West have supported a variety of jihadist regimes in Syria and possibly in other places, that is politically embarrassing. That is very, very embarrassing. And that is not something that should be kept secret. Because as you say, Frank, we were being encouraged to demonize the Syrian government. Now, I'm not an apologist for the Syrian government. I don't know what they're like, but similar to the government of Saddam Hussein, are things better now than they were then? I don't know. Seems to me that they're not. So let the government spell out, unless it is harmful to agents, our agents, British citizens working as civil servants, unless it's harmful to them, let them spell out the case against Shamima. Now, it needs to be pointed out that not only is loss of citizenship a factor to be considered. But there's also something such as expulsion, and expulsion from territories. And whilst it's not a similar case, we're almost all aware of the expulsion of Walter Rodney from Jamaica when he was a lecturer at the University of the West Indies because his views were unpalatable. Likewise, I was told by Joseph Antoine Kimbangu that the government of Grenada, previous government of Grenada, resorted to expulsion without reason of someone who became a vocal critic of that government. So we need to be aware, Luke and others, of the nature of government and how cruel they can be. Now, Laura, I think the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution prevents Trump doing what he proposes to do, which is prevent children of persons legally present in the United States attaining US citizenship. I don't know if it's the 14th Amendment or if there is previous things. I see you're shaking your head. I will stand to you. However,
No, I just want to say it's not children of people who are legally in the United States. It's any child born in.
Oh, yes. You're quite right. Quite right. Britain had a similar arrangement, a similar law. I forgot the Latin title of it. Don't worry, I don't go around quoting Latin. But if you were born here, as Kemi Badenoch was, from parents who are not British citizens, you gain citizenship of this country. That has been changed, I think, under the 83 Nationality Act. He's attempting to do the same thing because quite a huge number of American citizens were born of citizens, of people who were physically in the United States. It is rather strange that one American president who was not born in the United States was able to assume presidency. That was, of course, I think George Bush the senior. Now, on the other issue, the period of McCarthyism, the crazy period of McCarthyism, saw the United States government taking actions, some of which were mentioned in this book about how the German Jews were treated, such as preventing the travel of people such as Paul Robeson. The Vietnam refuseniks, those who defied the draft, had their passports rescinded so that they could not travel to any other country apart from the country that they had sought refuge in. To those who deserted from the war in Vietnam, likewise were facing that situation. Here we have with Trump, and now it looks like with Starmer, a variant of the McCarthy period. This time, not because you're a communist, but because we simply wish to find someone to hate. And this, I think, is probably more fearful. So I don't know what we can do, Luke, how we can deal with that. But I think just publicizing it is one of the measures we can take. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll take the final question from David. David, you want to unmute and come in?
Yeah, sorry, thanks very much. No, I am going to be brief. Just to bring it back to Shamima Begum, a few things to remember. It had been pointed out by some of the speakers who put it very, very well. She was a child when she left this country. She was 15. She was trafficked, and as somebody pointed out, she was raped while she was in Syria. She had children, all of whom have died. The other thing is there should be no speculation about what she did. We have no idea. We shouldn't be mentioning what she might have done. She's been demonized already by the state, by the Tories, by Labour, and by the media, by the mass media. She's been demonized already. So there should be no speculation about what she might have done. That for me, that's irrelevant. That is totally irrelevant. She should be here. She's a British citizen. For me, it's as simple as that. And I'm very pleased that CLS are waging this campaign. It's a good one. It's a righteous one. And I think we should try to spread it with other organizations. And as several people have said, contact MPs and so on and so forth. And because it's very important. It's about justice, basically. But again, there should be no speculation. That's irrelevant. We know that when things happen here, somebody mentioned the murder of, I've forgotten his name, the young guy in Streatham. Immediately, the police put out this stuff. He did this, he might have done that. Whether he did or not is irrelevant. Whether it's proven after his death, it's irrelevant. He was shot dead. And it's the same with Shamima Begum. She was a child when she left. She was trafficked. She was continually raped. She belongs here. Britain's her home. Simple as that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David. I think all that's left for us to do now is to thank you very much, Kwabena, for leading this discussion and fencing those questions very ably. So thanks a lot again.
Okay.
Now, if I can just ask people a chance to, if there's any meetings or things happening that you want to announce, now is your opportunity before we close the session.
I know you said
you
no
wanted to
questions,
respond to
No, I don't. I saw Paul had put his hand up, although it's late in the day. I don't know.
Yeah.
Paul, our Jamaican correspondent.
Oh, I didn't see his hand.
If
I didn't see Paul's hand at all.
Okay, and secondly, do you
Are you there? Are you there, Paul? No. If Paul's hand was up, let's have him. Paul?
I'm here, but
I didn't notice it.
Better eyesight across the Atlantic than me, Kwabena. I had no hand up.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Sorry. It was
All right.
Shazza. You're under Shazza. But I don't know if Shazza. Sorry, Shazza.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you wish me, whilst we have a few minutes, to circulate the letter to CARICOM to people here, or shall we wait until it is sent? Is it impolitic to do that?
Yes, maybe just hold off for
Okay.
a day or so, because I think somebody suggested maybe it could be tweaked a little bit somewhere. So
yeah,
somebody from the executive. So let's look at that, and then before we send it. Okay. All that is left for me to do is to thank people for coming onto the platform, coming onto the meeting, so we have a chance to discuss these issues. Without you, CLS is nothing. We encourage people at the beginning of the year to renew the memberships. If you're not a member, to take out memberships, take out your membership. I think it's fairly easy to go onto our website and get it all done now. Everything's been updated, so please join CLS. We do need that support to continue doing our work, and we've got a lot more we want to do this year, which you'll keep hearing about. And we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting for Sunday in March. Thank you all for joining us.